How's she gonna save anyone? She panics before bullets even fly. They laughed at her, mocked her, called her bookworm. But when a hidden sniper started killing rangers from over 3 kilometers out, the only person who could stop him was the woman they all underestimated. A medic shaped since childhood by a legendary marksman, a daughter chasing the truth behind her father's death, and the operator who made a shot so impossible, it rewrote military history. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from, and if you still believe honor matters, tap the screen to keep their legacy alive. 3,450 meters. A bullet cutting through thin mountain air. 6 full seconds of flight, then a figure collapsed on a distant ridge, long before the echo of the shot reached the valley. Radio static crackled. A shaken voice whispered, "Who the hell made that shot?" Men exchanged confused looks. No one had fired. No one thought they had. But the person who pulled the trigger wasn't a sniper. Not officially. She was the quiet medic they called Bookworm. A dusty training aircraft dropped its ramp on the landing pad of Camp Meridian, a remote outpost carved into the high desert. Heat shimmered over concrete. Rotor wash scattered sand across helmets and boots. Lieutenant Emma Blake stepped out first. Slim frame, steady eyes, medical pack slung over one shoulder. No swagger, no noise. She moved like someone used to watching the ground and the horizon at the same time. Nearby, rangers waited, arms crossed. Someone muttered, "Another book-smart medic." Another replied, "Bet she freezes the moment bullets fly." Laughter followed, quick, dismissive. Master Sergeant Daniel Mercer handled the introductions. He didn't smile. "This is LT Blake," he said. "She keeps you alive. Don't overwhelm her on day 1. More chuckles. Emma simply nodded and stepped past them. Inside the aid station, she unpacked gear with quiet precision. Bandages stacked perfectly. Instruments aligned. She worked fast, but without urgency, as if everything she touched already had a place waiting for it. Her hands were practiced, but no one noticed. They only saw the quiet girl who avoided the card tables and the weight racks. That night, she opened a metal box hidden under her cot. Inside was a worn M1911 pistol. The grip was chipped. The initials T.B. were scratched into the side. Emma held it gently, the way someone holds a memory they can't put down. A girl lying prone on sun-warmed rock. A man beside her, adjusting a heavy rifle. His voice calm. "Wind from your left, quarter value. Don't rush the trigger." The girl exhaled. Fired. A distant plate rang like a bell. The man smiled. Thomas Phantom Blake, her father. A sniper whose name carried weight in units most people had never heard of, but he never spoke to her about glory. Only about responsibility. "Pulling a trigger isn't about taking life," he said. "It's about protecting those who can't protect themselves." 3 years later, Thomas Blake died during a training accident at Quantico. At least, that was the official report. Emma never believed it. Every part of her knew something had been wrong. She left active duty for a time, then re-enlisted, quietly, keeping her questions to herself. Now she was here, in a base that didn't want her, among soldiers who didn't know her name beyond an easy joke. 2 days later, she rode in the back of a Humvee as a supply convoy wound through the foothills west of Meridian. The late afternoon sun cut sharp angles across the rocks. Emma watched the slopes out of habit, scanning without thinking. A flash of metal blinked near the crest of a ridge. Small, quick, like a signal mirror. She leaned forward slightly, said nothing. Minutes later, everything detonated. A pressure wave lifted the Humvee off its wheels. Sand sprayed through the cabin. A second blast shook the road. The world blurred between orange dust and shouts. Emma slammed into the seat in front of her. Her ears rang, but her hands moved before her thoughts caught up. Mercer lay half out of the door, bleeding heavily from his shoulder. Another ranger was down near the second vehicle, leg twisted, screaming. Smoke drifted from the front engine block. Emma crawled toward the closest body. Tourniquet, pressure dressing, airway check. Each step executed with mechanical calm, like she had done this 1,000 times. She looked at Mercer. He tried to joke, but his voice broke. Guess you're getting your first taste of real combat medicine, bookworm. Emma didn't answer. She kept working, but guilt pressed behind her ribs. She had seen the glint. She had recognized what it meant. She had chosen silence to avoid suspicion, and now men were bleeding because of it. When the rescue team finally arrived, she climbed into the back with the injured. Hands stained with dust and blood. Eyes dark, unreadable. No one on that convoy knew they had just met the most dangerous person at Camp Meridian. And no one knew the ambush was only the first message. From a shooter who wasn't supposed to exist, night dropped fast over Camp Meridian. Floodlights snapped on across the perimeter. Dust hung in the air from the medevac rotors still fading into the dark. Emma Blake walked out of the trauma bay with her sleeves stiff from dried blood. She had stabilized Mercer and the others, but the guilt stayed lodged behind her sternum. She hadn't said a word about the glint on the ridge. Hours later, another aircraft arrived. A matte black transport with no visible markings. Operators stepped out, silent, armored, expressions unreadable. At their center was Colonel Marcus Hale, an aging special missions officer with silver hair and a posture that could cut steel. He greeted the command staff with a nod, then swept his gaze across the courtyard. It stopped briefly on Emma. Hale didn't approach her, but something in his eyes suggested recognition, like he was comparing her to a memory he hadn't expected to see. Inside the briefing hall, the message was short and grim. A hostile sniper was hunting Meridian's patrol routes. 3 confirmed kills in the past 10 days. Shot distances far beyond typical insurgent capability. Hale said only one sentence that froze the room. "You're dealing with someone who has formal training." The base commander asked what kind. Hale didn't blink. "The kind you don't walk away from unless you're very, very good." Emma listened from the back wall, unnoticed among the medics and support staff. One detail hit her like a dropped weight shot pattern. Every location Hale marked out followed a signature shed seen before. Her father's old notebooks were filled with sketches just like it. The meeting ended abruptly when alarms blared across the base. Guards sprinted to the east gate. The sound of distant gunfire echoed through the hills. Emma ran toward the commotion as Rangers pulled 3 injured men through the barrier. One struggled to breathe, chest rising unevenly. Another had a deep wound beneath the ribs. She dropped to her knees, hands moving, eyes steady. She inserted a decompression needle with clean precision. The man gasped. Air rushed out. His breathing stabilized almost instantly. Hale watched quietly from behind the MPs. He noticed her grip, her posture, her focus. He had seen that kind of calm only once years ago lying beside a man named Thomas Blake. Later, while the wounded slept, Hale approached Emma outside the med tent. He spoke gently. "Your last name is Blake. Any relation to Thomas Phantom Blake?" Emma froze. The night seemed to still around them. "He was my father, sir." Hale exhaled like a truth had finally found its place. "I served with him in Basra. Finest marksman I ever met." He watched her face for a reaction. There was more to his work than people knew. Emma looked away before emotion could betray her. She asked only one question. "Is that sniper connected to him?" Hale didn't answer, which was an answer of its own. The next morning, Hale requested a weapons readiness check at the long-range range. He wanted the base's best shooters to demonstrate capability ahead of a planned competition. Emma stayed back, documenting medical supplies, trying to make herself small. Then Hale called out, "Lieutenant Blake, step forward." The range fell silent. Rangers exchanged glances. Someone whispered, "Why her?" Mercer, recovering on a stretcher nearby, raised his eyebrows in warning. Hale pointed at a Barrett M107, resting on its bipod. He spoke with the tone of someone verifying a suspicion. "Show me your firing posture." Emma considered refusing, but refusing would raise more questions. So she lowered herself behind the rifle, adjusting the cheek weld, the shoulder lock, the rear bag, flawlessly. The murmurs grew louder. Hale's voice cut through them. "Take 1 round at the 700-meter silhouette. Whenever you're ready." Master Sergeant Mercer tried to intervene. "Sir, with respect, she's medical personnel." "This isn't." Hale raised his hand. "Unless you believe she's unsafe." She fires. Emma's pulse thudded once, then settled into the old rhythm her father had drilled into every breath. 4 seconds in, 4 seconds hold, 4 seconds out. The crosshair floated, steadied, locked. The shot cracked across the valley, a deep, rolling thunder that made boots vibrate on the concrete. Spotters lifted scopes. One blinked twice. "Center strike," he reported. A perfect dead center hit. Rangers stared at her like they'd misread reality. Hale simply nodded, but he wasn't finished. He stepped closer. Quiet, intent. "I'd like to see you at 1,200 meters. Gasps followed. Even expert shooters rarely attempted that distance under field conditions. Emma didn't break eye contact. Her voice was level. "I can make it." Hale stepped back. "Then show me." She adjusted elevation, corrected for crosswind, analyzed heat shimmer rising across the distant ridge. The rifle thundered again. Silence stretched. Spotters checked again, then swore under their breath. "Direct hit," one said. 1,200, confirmed. The entire base shifted in that moment. Bookworm was gone. Something else stood in her place. And Hale knew exactly what he was seeing. Not a lucky medic. Not a fluke. A legacy reborn, one he had only heard whispered about in the darker corners of special operations. The silence after the 1,200-meter shot didn't last long. A base-wide alarm ripped through Camp Meridian, sharp enough to vibrate the windows. Hale grabbed his radio before anyone else moved. A patrol had been ambushed near the southern checkpoint. Multiple casualties. Precision fire coming from elevated terrain. Rangers sprinted across the compound, grabbing rifles, armor, and medkits. Engines roared to life. Dust clouds rose as vehicles rolled toward the gate. Emma was still kneeling by the Barrett when Mercer limped toward her from the aid station. His shoulder was wrapped in thick bandages, but he moved with purpose. He handed her a fresh magazine. "Johnson and Pell are down," he said, breath tight. "They're the only long-range shooters we had. We're blind out there." Hale turned to Collins, the last qualified marksman on the roster. "Your range?" 800, on a good day," Collins answered. "Whoever's out there is firing past 1,600. Hale didn't hesitate. He looked directly at Emma. "We need you." Mercer stepped forward. "Sir." Shays. Hale cut him off with a tone that left no room for debate. "Shay's the only one who can match that shooter." Emma didn't ask questions. She only said, "I'll need environmental data, elevation maps, and my father's journal." Mercer blinked at the last request but didn't argue. He sprinted toward the barracks as Hale pointed Emma to a transport vehicle. Collins climbed in beside her with a tablet containing terrain overlays. They moved fast, less than a minute to clear the wire. The desert opened in front of them, stretching into broken ridgelines and dry riverbeds. The world smelled like dust and cordite. The convoy halted at an elevated overlook chosen for line-of-sight potential. Emma jumped out and scanned the slopes. The air shimmered with heat, distorting the horizon. Mercer arrived with the journal. The leather was worn, edges frayed, pages filled with her father's handwriting dense math, ballistic curves, wind flow mapping across uneven terrain. She flipped to the section he once called the impossible shots. "Thanks," she said quietly. Mercer nodded, still breathing hard. "You tell me what else you need." Emma set up the Barrett on a stabilized platform. Wind touched her cheek, soft but shifting. She measured it with a handheld meter, then compared readings against ridge elevation. Collins fed her updates over the tablet. "Patrol is stuck 2 clicks south. Shooters hitting them from higher ground. These are the 3 possible positions." Emma studied the screen. Only one location made sense, a narrow rock shelf facing the sun. Too far for most. Perfect for someone trained. Hale's voice crackled over the radio. "Blake, extraction team can't move. They'll be exposed on the slope. We need that sniper neutralized before we lose anyone else." Emma gave the coordinates. "Distance: 3,290 meters from my position." Collins swore under his breath. "That's insane." Emma didn't react. Her focus was absolute. Then the radio erupted with static. A voice slid through the channel, calm, accented, taunting. "American shooter, I know you are listening." Emma froze. Collins stiffened. The voice continued. "I remember another Blake. He tried to warn your people. He died thinking it mattered. Emma's chest tightened. Her breath cut short for a moment. The man on the radio was describing her father's last moments. Hale responded instantly. Blake, you don't have to listen to this. Emma lowered her head, steadying her voice. He just told me exactly where he is. Only one ridge has that angle of return. She marked it on her slate. Wind from 3 directions. Temperature drop off the higher peak. Mirage forming near the valley line. Her father once told her, extreme range isn't about hitting the target. It's about understanding everything between you and the target. She inhaled, exhaled. Locked into the rhythm. Hale's voice returned. Lower now. Our patrol medic says Mitchell is bleeding out. 2 minutes. Maybe. Emma checked the timer. 2 minutes wasn't enough to reach him. Only enough to end the threat. Her pulse steadied. She angled the rifle up, higher than seemed reasonable. The bullet would arc like a thrown spear, not a straight shot. Collins whispered, "This is impossible." Emma didn't answer. She whispered something only she could hear, her father's old line about physics making the shot. Then, she pressed the trigger. The Barrett unleashed a thunderous blast. Dust lifted off the ground in a halo beneath her. The recoil punched into her shoulder like a hammer. For nearly 6 seconds nothing happened. The only sound was the rattle of wind against metal. Then observers on the far ridge shouted over the comms, "Impact! Direct hit! Shooter is down!" Hale's voice followed instantly. "Extraction team, move! Go, go!" Emma lowered the rifle. Her heartbeat finally broke through the numb silence. The impossible shot had landed. But she didn't celebrate. She only stared at the spot on the ridge where the sniper had fallen. Because she knew the voice. She had heard it once before, years ago, when her father disappeared. And this wasn't the end. It was only the opening move. The extraction convoy rolled back into Camp Meridian just before sunset. Engines sputtered. Doors swung open. The wounded were carried out on stretchers, dust sliding off their uniforms like a second skin. Emma dropped from the Overwatch truck and jogged straight to the med bay. Her shoulders were stiff from the Barrett recoil, but she barely felt it. Mitchell lay on a gurney, half conscious, face pale from blood loss. He tried to smile when he saw her. "They said you took someone out. 3 kilometers away." Emma checked his pulse, adjusting the bandage with practiced speed. "Hold still," she said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes carried the weight of the choice Shed just made. "You're stable. That's what matters." Mitchell's hand tightened on her sleeve. "You saved us. All of us." Emma looked away for a moment, then continued her work in silence. Hours later, when the base finally settled, Colonel Hale called a briefing in the operations hall. The room filled with Rangers, intel techs, and support staff. Their voices were hushed, tension stretching thin across the metal benches. Hale stood at the front. The projector lit his features in cold blue. He didn't waste words. "Today," he said, "Camp Meridian survived a coordinated attack." He pointed to the map behind him. The hostile sniper neutralized at range 319 was identified as Viktor Serov, former Spetsnaz marksman. Gasps moved through the crowd. Serov's name wasn't unknown. Rumors tied him to precision killings across multiple conflict zones, never proven, never formally acknowledged. Hale continued. Serov operated independently for the past few years. Contract work, covert elimination tasks, often overlapping with our own interests. He paused. His gaze shifted toward Emma. "What isn't public," he said, "is that Serov was linked to a series of accidents involving U.S. Special Operations personnel." Emma felt her throat tighten. Hale pressed a button. Serov's dossier filled the wall. The last entry glowed brighter than the rest. Quantico training incident. 3 years ago target. Thomas Blake status. Confirmed. The room froze. No whisper. No movement. Emma stood in the back row, fingers slowly curling into fists. The confirmation hit with a cold, shattering clarity. Someone had hired Serov to kill her father and made it look routine. Hale faced the room again. "I've forwarded preliminary evidence to the Defense Oversight Bureau. A deeper investigation has been approved. Full access. No restrictions." A ripple of relief passed through the soldiers. Justice, even whispered, was something rare in places like this. When the hall emptied, Mercer approached Emma. His arm was in a sling, but his posture held none of its earlier doubt. "I owe you something," he said softly. "An apology. And a thank you." Emma studied him for a moment. He looked different now, no arrogance, no judgment. Just a man facing his mistakes. "You don't owe me anything," she said. "You tried to protect the people around you, even me, in your own way." Mercer exhaled, relief slipping through his expression. "Still, I won't underestimate you again." A faint smile tugged at his mouth. "Honestly, no one here will." In the weeks that followed, Camp Meridian transformed. New protocols emerged. Hale authorized integrated training, medics learning defensive tactics, shooters practicing emergency care. Emma's name anchored most of the new programs. Rangers sought her guidance in both fields. Some asked quietly, others openly, but all came with respect they'd never shown before. Mitchell recovered and joined her as her primary assistant. He tackled the medical side with determined focus, though his fascination with long-range shooting remained obvious. "Just saying," he joked one day. "If you ever want to teach someone how physics bends for you, I volunteer." Emma didn't laugh, but her eyes softened at the edges. 6 months later, the desert turned colder. Winds carried the smell of winter. Emma stood alone on the eastern observation deck, the same place where Shed made her impossible shot. The Barrett rested beside her. Her medical pack sat at her feet. This was her new normal, 2 worlds, balanced. Footsteps approached. Colonel Hale joined her at the railing. He didn't speak at first. They watched a patrol move along the lower valley, silhouettes drifting through orange light. Then Hale handed her a sealed folder. Thick, heavy, the kind marked for eyes only. "The Bureau completed the first phase," he said. They traced Serov's contracts, followed the payment channels, pieced together the authorization chain. Emma didn't open it yet. She stared at the cover, breath shallow. "There's a name inside," Hale said quietly. "Someone high in the Pentagon, someone with the authority to bury anything, including your father." Her heartbeat slowed. Steady, controlled. "And there's something else." Hale's voice dropped. "We found a target list." Emma looked up. "What list?" "A list of operators considered potential threats to the program Serov worked for." He hesitated. "The last name on that list is yours." The folder felt heavier in her hands. Wind whipped across the ridge. Hale watched her carefully. "Emma," he said, "whatever's coming, you won't face it alone." She opened the folder. Her eyes moved across the first page. They hardened. The desert fell silent around her. "When do we move?" she asked. Hale didn't smile. He simply nodded. The fight for her father's legacy had only just begun. If you enjoyed the story, consider sending a super chat to help bring more stories like this. Now, click on the video on the screen to hear another story that's just as powerful and captivating, with courage, sacrifice, and a choice that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about duty and justice.